higher inflation is almost inevitable. There was a beautiful chance to help people understand that paying taxes is a wise thing to do. And I think this has not been really grabbed. It doesn't matter that it is a good and a big employer in the region. I mean, right. What matters is the quality of the education for the child.
This is the Person of Interest podcast, where we meet extraordinary people with a story to tell.
Hi, and welcome to the Person of Interest podcast. My name is Agnes Alace, and I am joined here today by Līva Zorgenfreija, who is the Chief Economist at Swedbank Latvia. She has gained experience in the Directorate-General for Economic and Financial Affairs of the European Commission. She's worked at Rothschild HDF Investment Solutions in France, and then worked at the Bank of Latvia as an economist at the Monetary Policy Department. And since 2019, she's been with Swedbank Latvia. She studied at the University of Warwick, where she got her bachelor's in economics, politics, and international studies, and then a master's degree in economics and public policy from École Polytechnique
yes.
and Sciences Po and ENSAE in France. I don't speak French, so this was a great attempt on my behalf. So today we want to talk about what an economist does, what are the current affairs regarding the COVID pandemic and the economic situation in Latvia like at the moment, and what we think might happen in the future, and also a little bit about what it is like to work in the finance sector here in Latvia. So let's start with an intro. How would you briefly characterize what a chief economist at a bank does? How does the bank take your analysis into account in its lending policies, investment policies, and so on?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Then what do I do? So basically, I am paid to deliver independent analysis of the macroeconomic situation. And this is important both for the bank as well as for the general public, and actually also, all the clients, and that involves that. So what we do is we look at what is going on in the economy. We see what the effects of any of the trends that are there could be on the bank or on, separate clients, on maybe the labor market, etc. And then, of course, we draw some conclusions as to what might happen in the future. Another word for that is forecasting, right? Economists are notoriously, bad at forecasting, just like everyone else is, but we still try. And I guess what we can do, and the value added that we have, is that we have gone through the data. We know the past, maybe relationships between different indicators. We can see and try to have a forecast and an expectation of what is going to happen in the future. And I guess this analysis, this explaining what is going on and how to kind of translate these trends in macroeconomics to your situation, to your company, to your real life, is what we're all about. It's very important to, first of all, to know economics, then to be able to talk to people and be clear at explaining what you're doing and what the trends are, and be interesting in the way that you can find different angles that perhaps other people have not looked at.
Right, and currently we're probably at living through very interesting times when more and more people in the society see how economy and societal resistance and healthcare system capacities, how they are all so interlinked. And many people try to explain the current situation in terms of a crisis. I would certainly agree we are in a crisis of healthcare. It is a pandemic, but would we also call this a crisis in economic terms? will you use this label? Because I think if we look at some of the data, and I'm not an economist, I look at some of the data of our GDP growth or not, or trade balances, and I see that some companies who are exporters, they're actually doing just fine. It seems that the economy hasn't shrunk as much as perhaps was expected or feared. So are we in a crisis?
Yeah, we certainly are. If we look at, for example, if we look globally, then the global economy in 2020, it shrunk by, well, more than 3%, 3.5, around something like that. If we compare it to the past, then it's, well, we have seen greater declines in growth only during the World War II, for example. Even during the global financial crisis, which was 13 years ago, we didn't see such a fall in GDP. Actually, the global GDP barely fell. It was almost remained on par with the previous year. So yes, we do see a crisis, and of course this crisis and the depth of the crisis was very much kind of limited by the extraordinary effort on all parts. So of course I'm not even talking about healthcare workers and everyone who is directly fighting the virus and fighting the pandemic, but it's also the unprecedented, and actually I think last year there was an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented, but so there was an unprecedented support from from the monetary policy side, from central banks, as well as from the fiscal policy side, so from the governments. And if we talk about governments, then the total stimulus to the economy was around 16 trillion US dollars, which is more than the size of the euro area GDP. So yes, the fall was perhaps less steep than expected in GDP terms, but it is because of this amazing support from all sides or all parts of the state, and both from monetary and fiscal side, that really helped it to kind of maintain this level. And of course, if we look at, I think the IMF has suggested that had it not been for all this support, then the fall would have been at least 3 times greater. So yes, we have done actually quite well with all our efforts. And if we look at Latvia, then for Latvia it's a bit of a different situation, because what we saw during the global financial crisis was a much larger fall in GDP than what we saw now. And you're absolutely right that it is also very much a question of who we are looking at in the economy. And so right now, for example, in Q4 of 2020, the GDP in Latvia was only 1.5% lower than before the crisis. So not much of a crisis, right? And whereas on the other hand, if we look at the global financial crisis, then it took us 10 years to recover. So so the differences are vast. And of course that is because of the differences in the state of the economy just going into the crisis. Because if 12 years ago, we were an economy that had a real estate boom, massive inflation, massive current account deficit, then right now we have been going into the crisis with, well, no bubbles really, quite prudent fiscal policies, and also, which is not least, we are in the euro area, which definitely helps to have the government that is able to support the economy at the times of the crisis. So,
and what do you think, how would you evaluate the efforts of the Latvian government? Have they been targeted enough? Has it been successful in identifying the sectors of the economy that need most support?
So first of all, we have to understand that, of course, this is the first time that this has happened, and it is a tough job,
sure.
Et cetera, et cetera. And then another thing is that Latvia is a part of the kind of maybe European type of system. We are a welfare state, more or less, and the types of support is so on the one hand we have a lot of these automatic stabilizers as well that help the economy to go through the various business cycles, and then on top of that we've also had additional support. And the types of additional support that we have had is often something similar to what we see elsewhere. So these are furlough benefits, for example, for workers. These are in the second wave. It's also wage subsidies to workers, and all of this definitely helps to keep the main. So the main issue that they're trying to solve, of course, is to keep the unemployment level as low as possible. And to be honest, they have succeeded in doing that. And what we're seeing now is the registered unemployment is above 8%. It is, and at the peak, it has only reached something like the levels of 2016. So not a massive surge in unemployment. And certainly, a part of the explanation is, of course, all these support measures. And if we actually had all the people that were on furlough benefits or wage subsidies been actually unemployed, then the unemployment level would have been maybe twice as high than we're seeing right now. So definitely that's good. But of course there are also some issues with that, and of course. So what we saw at the very beginning is that the range of the companies and people that could qualify for this support was very limited. The government was almost unwilling to give out the support, and it was the kind of fiscal prudence on the part of the government was maybe a bit too exaggerated at the start. And this definitely didn't help because the good thing is that the government tried to solve all these issues going forward and tried to listen to them, to the social partners and all the companies. So these mistakes were corrected along the way. But I think they missed out on a wonderful opportunity to kind of show the population that the state is there in the times of need. So when the proverbial crap hits the fan, pardon my French, the state will be there to support you. And what we are having, what we're seeing right now is, of course, that that this unwillingness and
lack of flexibility, maybe
lack of flexibility, it has led people to maybe think that the government is not really there for them. So there was a beautiful chance to help people understand that paying taxes is a wise thing to do. And I think this has not been really grabbed. And that's very unfortunate because, of course, if we look at the Latvian economy as such, then one of the major issues is shadow economy. And this was a chance to kind of work towards decreasing that and increasing the people's willingness to participate and pay taxes. But I think it was not actually achieved, unfortunately.
Right, and also because of this, we also are fearing that there might be an increase in socioeconomic inequality. The European Union has criticized us for not really taking the chance provided by the recovery funds to address this issue. How would we go about this? How do we establish a dialogue again with the society and also with businesses and use this recovery period after the pandemic to address some of these issues?
So I think you're very right by stating that inequality is a major issue and it actually could have been increased during this crisis. And when thinking about the recovery period, I think it is key for the government to understand, first of all, what our objective is. Because I think often the problem is that we have, loads of different interests that are there, different ministries that want to have their fair, or whatever you want to call it, share, and we actually lack a sense of direction. And this is very important if we want to actually use all this money for the best with the best possible results. And of course, right now there's a lot of criticism to how the government is handling it, but I think there is still time. We can still try to work with this and come up with something that more people are satisfied with. Yeah.
Would you say that the direction for supporting businesses has been well placed? You've said before in some of your analysis that this is our chance to make most of these investments, to move to a new type of economy that is greener and more digital. Has the support been designed in a way that expresses a sense of direction, or has it been more of a patchwork type of reaction?
I think, well, when we're talking about support to the economy, I think we need to kind of distinguish between two things. So on the one hand, it's the immediate support, which is, I think it is, well, not it cannot actually be very targeted. It's basically, I mean, whoever is hurt, we're helping them. And then another thing is, of course, the next step, which is hopefully once we all get vaccinated, the economy can restart. Then at that point, we have all this money from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, also from the new multi-annual financial framework, and all of that will come together to hopefully lift us to a new level, a new path of growth. And there we definitely have to think about what our priorities are, because well, first of all, I think what a priority of any small country should be is, of course, exports, and it's not just exports of goods; it's also exports of services. And there we see right now, for example, what we're seeing is, of course, quite strong just developments in manufacturing. We also talked about that a bit. Manufacturing is the one strong thing that is going on in the economy right now. If we want to pick one, then that's it. Manufacturing is doing really well, and actually Latvian manufacturers have comparatively also to what has been happening in Europe have fared very well. So we are able to adapt to also very poor and bad situations, and we are able to find our niches, and actually we have been able to raise market shares during this crisis, and we can work on, and build on that. So, but the problem is that our value added in manufacturing is still rather low, and if we want to be a country that is rich, that pays its employees good amounts of money, that they can sustain a good and healthy living, then we need to raise the wages, and in order to raise the wages, we need to raise the productivity of the economy by creating more value added in what we're exporting. So there, I think we need to work on higher value added products in manufacturing. And another thing is, of course, services, where we're also actually, prior to the pandemic, it was a strong part of the economy. Of course, right now, during the pandemic, we have seen a massive fall, for example, in airline traffic. We have seen, of course, a fall in tourism, and this all makes the story about the services sector and services exports. But then, on the other hand, of course, there are other types of services exports, like IT, different business services, and those are feeling much better during the crisis as well. And I think, but the key to services, and actually also to manufacturing, is the people. And if we're thinking about what we need to invest in order to get the best people, because that's actually the only resource that Latvia has. The only real resource is our human resource. And what we need to do is, of course, work on improving the education system and work on improving the health system. Because so on the one hand, the education system is what educates our talent in the future, and if we have a poor school network where there's very poor results in remote locations, in schools in remote locations, we need to do something about it. And it doesn't matter that it is a good and a big employer in the region. I mean,
Right.
what matters is the quality of the education for the child. And then going further, it's of course also the higher education system that needs to be taken a good look at. And then in terms of the healthcare, healthcare is also important to have a good quality workforce, because what we have now is that healthy life expectancy for Latvian workers, especially for male workers, is lower than what we see in the European Union, and actually amongst the lowest. Furthermore, our population is aging, and we are very far behind in lifelong learning. So all of this piles up to some sort of a time bomb, because we're having a population that is declining. We're having people that are not very healthy. We're having an education system that doesn't really bring the best results. And I think this money from also from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, a part of that should definitely be going into solving these types of problems as well. Because, well, we can invest all we want in machinery and for the manufacturing sector, but it's not going to get us anywhere unless we have the people that can work there.
And that's the long-term view that we should take whenever we plan this. And actually, the education system and the healthcare system are those that where shortcomings were most illuminated during this pandemic. The ability to cope with the new situation or with an increased burden was, I think, the lack of this ability was significantly exposed. We, of course, saw that some of the bigger hospitals were able to scratch together some resources, but we so far have barely escaped from a crash in the system. And what we also see, and this is not only in Latvia, but also more globally, another element where vulnerabilities are exposed is the situation of some vulnerable groups in the society, and especially our efforts so far to achieve some kind of gender equality, where the World Bank and UN say that because of this pandemic, a number of women and children who will suffer from poverty as a result from the crackdown of several of these systems is going to increase at a pace that is going to throw us back about 100 years in terms of achieving some kind of equality. And also in Latvia, if we think about the sectors where women are mostly employed, it's the hospitality, restaurants, cafes sector, also beautician services that have been very outspoken about the lack of adequate support during this time because of also their employment forms, not necessarily the fact that they don't pay taxes. It's just the model that they have used so far. In the long run and in the planning, how do we address these more vulnerable groups in the society to prevent even a bigger exacerbation of socioeconomic inequality? Is this something that might affect and make us lag behind in terms of economic recovery?
So, first of all, I want to talk about a bit what we see in terms of this inequality, how crisis has affected different groups of people in Latvia. I mean, certainly globally, it is, as you very rightly pointed out, it is the young, women, low-skilled, and informal workers that are mostly hurt by this, to the greatest extent. If we look at, just plainly at the data in Latvia, then actually from those that have become unemployed during the crisis year, actually most have been men. And we were very surprised about it at first, but then we realized that there is just another issue in Latvia that was coming on top of all the problems with the virus-related problems, because already at the start of the year, due to all these issues with Russian transit and cargoes, the state railway company was firing a lot of workers, and most of them are male. So this has kind of a bit distorted the data, and if we account for this difference, and we account for this fact that take out this fact that the railway company fired a lot of people, which was not related to COVID, then if we look at only the COVID impact, then it's definitely still female that have suffered the most, because of the reasons you mentioned. They are well represented in all of the most hurt sectors. Then when it comes to the low-skilled, it's also, we see that the sharpest rise in unemployment was exactly in the low-skilled sector, and actually right now we see that so the first big increase was in the basic, those that have only basic education. Now we also see that those that have secondary education, the unemployment rate there is rising, whereas for those that are with higher education, it is low and quite stable, I would say. So, and I think a key issue is with the young, because this is the problem is so both in terms of just mental health and how well they feel about themselves. Also, of course, the question is of the quality of education and whether our teachers were digital enough to go into this. And I think at first most of them were not, but many of them learned on the way and were quite actually good at providing even these digital online lessons. But still, I think there is a large part, especially those children that are from the already disadvantaged families, whose level of quality of education will decrease even more. They have already been in a disadvantaged position, and with this, the gap is going to be even wider. So the government really has to think about how to work with these vulnerable groups in order not to have this year in their lives ruin the rest of their life. Because for maybe the richer kids, maybe that's not as big of a problem, even though in moral in mental health terms it perhaps might still be so. The issues there are massive, and the good thing is that once we get the economy going again, for example, the women, the women who are the ones that are working in these maybe most hurt sectors, with these sectors opening, they will be able to get their jobs back. Hopefully, some of them will have learned some new skills, and I think that's a key thing for the government to what to do to really go out there and provide an opportunity for these people to learn new skills. As I said, our lifelong learning in Latvia, the prevalence of that is very low. So this is something we really need to work on. And for a person to be able to change their jobs during this crisis, that's a great opportunity. But of course, you need to work for that. So hopefully, some of them will have upskilled. Others might be able to get back their old job at some point. Of course, by that time, they might have really lost their income stream. They might have become maybe even poorer. So that is another issue that where the government has to think about. Also the social safety net for those people that might become permanently maybe unemployed. Hopefully not, but there might be some. So many things for the government to do. The good thing is that as a result of this crisis, governments have started playing a much larger role in the economy. So it is not unthinkable that they would be able to maybe raise the tax revenue by, it would have to be that where they're taxing more, but the population, I think, expects now the government that they will be playing a more active role in managing the economy. So in that sense, maybe we have, there is also an opportunity to change something there and to move from almost the most unequal society in the EU to something less unequal.
Right. And then before we talk a little bit about your experience working in the sector in Latvia, my last question about the kind of economic outlook is the predicted rapid increase in inflation. What is the predicted volume in this? How will this affect our daily spending? We know that people have actually increased their savings during this time because of limited opportunities to go out and take away coffees every day and so on. So how will this affect our daily lives in the coming couple of years?
So yeah, this inflation question is actually what we get a lot from our clients as well. And this is, I think Bank of America had a survey of all the investors and it is their top concern right now. If in all the previous months it was COVID, then now it's in inflation already. And what we're seeing is, so first of all, inflation will certainly, there will be like a mechanical rise in the short term because the base effects have been really strong. So this time last year, prices of oil fell, actually for some contracts they fell into the negative territory. So you had to pay for someone to take your oil, which is crazy. And of course this year the prices are much higher and we will see just this technical increase in the inflation figures. Then another thing is of course that we have been basically kind of jolted out of this pre-pandemic equilibrium. And what happened during the first wave is that many companies just stopped their production, either because they had to or because they were just afraid to do anything. They stopped investing, and because of that, there were some supply issues appeared. However, once the economies reopened after the first wave during the summer, the demand surged. And so there was a disequilibrium basically between the supply and the demand that you could offer. And that, of course, a disequilibrium there, it raises again the prices. And we are seeing that right now in the prices of raw materials, in prices of actually transportation. We see massive gluts in the supply chains. We have delivery times that are at the longest in the 23-year history that they have actually been collecting this data. So the issues are there, and of course all of that also speaks to greater inflation, at least in the short term. Now, and of course what you also mentioned, of course, these accumulated savings that are there, and if people are feeling quite good about their financial health, then once the economy reopens, the pent-up demand is released and they want to consume more and they are able to pay for that. And therefore, higher inflation is almost inevitable. Now, the question is whether this will continue in the medium term as well, or it will just remain a short-term phenomenon. And if all this short-term story is definitely holding, we will see higher inflation. Then the medium-term story is not as clear-cut. And what we see is, so basically, on the one hand, central banks are, say they will be tolerating higher inflation. And the question around inflation is always about expectations. What do people expect? Because inflation is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you expect the prices to be higher, then you will ask your employer to pay you a higher wage. His costs go up, therefore he will want to charge more to his for his products, etc., and it's like a spiral of higher inflation. And if that holds, then we can move to an environment with permanently higher inflation. However, what we have seen all this time previously, before this crisis and after, for example, the global financial crisis, when there was also quite a lot of stimulus, especially monetary stimulus that was released in the economy, we haven't actually seen wage growth in Europe. Latvia, that's another story. Wage growth here is very high. But in Europe, the wage growth has been very, very moderate. So these inflation expectations have been, very managed. They have been there where the central bank wants it to be. Central bank wants inflation to be moderate, around 2%, and they have the inflation, and actually inflation has not been even at the 2%, it has been even lower than that. But right now the question is, of course, whether this will still hold true, and that's a question of expectations. Actually, when I was studying here, Martin Hansen, I think, had a slide on inflation, and it was like with a toothpaste tube, and he said that inflation is like toothpaste. Once it's out of the tube, you cannot get it back in. So, yeah.
It's true, and I also think when thinking about this and kind of considering my expectations regarding this, I realized that at some point I will have missed a service for so long, or a trip somewhere, and I will also have forgotten by then how much it cost before.
Right? Yeah.
So I'll be like, this seems all right. So I think this is also it probably plays in with our expectations about what life is going to be like after all of this ends, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think another thing with this question of the prices of services once it all opens, I mean, all these companies have been under pressure for a long time, right? They have, and perhaps in order to reopen, they will have to invest in different, covers, and to make it the environment safe
Right.
in order to not in the times of virus, right? So that all costs money, and in order to get all of these investments back somehow, they might have no other choice but to increase the prices. So, but yes, again, question is, how will that translate into the medium term, whether it will translate into higher inflation expectations. So far, it doesn't seem like that. When you ask people, and there are different surveys about this, when you ask people whether they think that inflation will rise, it's not we cannot see a massive increase there, but people's expectations are very fickle. They're not actually. I don't think they know much about what's going on in the economy unless they really are, following things, because in Latvia, for example, often when you have a survey or something and you ask people what's the biggest problem in Latvia, they say inflation, and before the crisis, inflation was low, and at some years it was like even near zero, and you're thinking, I mean, what type of inflation are you talking about? Because of course, if people are very prone to kind of projecting their own experience to the wider world, and if they see that the price of butter has gone up, they would think that, oh my God, the inflation is so high, but that's not always the case. So yeah, this inflation expectations story is very tricky.
And now, I guess I want to go to the last part of our conversation about your role in explaining these many of the things that we talked about, also to the wider society, and you being a woman who's in the role of a chief economist. This isn't something that we see often in Latvia. If we look at the commercial banks. Is the financial sector a man's world? How do you feel working there? Do you feel like this is something that affects your image, your professional image, and the level of trust people place in your experiences and opinions?
When I started working in the sector, I had an interview once with a journalist, and it was something about the crisis, and I was explaining how the imbalances in the economy before the previous crisis were very high, and right now they're not, and this was maybe like 4 years ago or something, and he was like, but what do you really know about the previous crisis? I mean, you were probably like 15, and I'm like, okay. I was shocked. I mean, I don't know if he would have asked that if if it was a male there. I'm not sure. I mean, I felt that this was kind of very inappropriate, and so sometimes I think you get like a weird reaction from people. But then I guess it all depends on the quality of your analysis at the end of the day. Hopefully, maybe the first impressions the first impressions definitely matter. But if you work as an economist for a longer time, then I think what matters ultimately is your analysis and how you tell the story, and whether you tell it in a way that people can understand and can relate to and actually have a use of it. Currently, like at Swedbank, we are, I think the company prides itself on being one where it's equal opportunities for males and females, and I really feel that it is that way. And also the whole community, I think, is very supportive to so that the talent can shine rather than whether it's a male or a female. But I think Latvia is maybe better than perhaps other countries, because when I used to work in France, I felt that I think me being a female was more of a problem than now that I'm working in Latvia.
Well, let's hope that this is an encouragement to those students of Stockholm School of Economics in Riga who might be listening to this podcast, that this is, in terms of the financial sector, a country of opportunities for everyone. And thank you very much for this conversation. Look forward to seeing your analysis also further on in the media here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was produced by SSE Riga. If you'd like to learn more about the topic, visit the open course schedule at SSE Riga Executive Education. For more podcasts, find us on Spotify, iTunes, or the platform of your choice. Remember, share this episode with your friends and colleagues.